Thank you for coming, and it's very good to see you all here. So, just about Father Alberto, a moment. So, Father Alberto was born in Lecco, in the north of Italy, in 1980, and in 2005 he graduated in medicine at the University of Milan Bicocca, and then he specialized in orthopedics and traumatology with the same university in 2008. So, in 2014 he was ordained a priest in Milan. Then he obtained a licentiate in theology at the Pontifical Institute John Paul II of Rome and Washington in 2016, and in 2018 a master in integrative neuroscience at the University of Edinburgh, Scotland. In 2019 he was awarded a doctorate in theology at the Pontifical Institute John Paul II of Rome, and in the same year he became professor of ethics of life for the Higher Institute of Religious Sciences in Milan. He leads the master course Spirituality in Care, accompanying patients in the world of health. And also, last thing I want to say, he published various books, among which Body and Logos Within the Process of Gender Identity, The Serious Case of Transgenderism, Bioethics to the Test, then The Enigma of Human Sexuality, and finally, Conjugal Morality, Anthropological and Theological Foundations, and Practical and Pastoral Issues. So this is Father Alberto, and now I leave the floor to him, and I will go here to ask him the first question. Yes. So the first question we wanted to ask you is this one. How are sexuality and sexual identity understood by our culture?
Good evening, everyone. First, before giving my talk, I wanted to say thank you to Father Raffaele and to Carlo for inviting me. It's a pleasure for me to be here among you. And I want also to apologize to you for my English, because even though I spent a year in Edinburgh, I have never learned English as well as I wished. That's life. So this question asks to speak about the complexity of human sexuality. Human sexuality is quite complex because it's articulated on three levels. The first one is sex, which indicates the biological datum, genetic, gonadal, genital, and cerebral. The second one is gender, which indicates the inner psychological perception of identity, feeling to be boy or girl, man or women, and this is gender identity. But the second level, gender, indicates also the outer cultural perception of habits associated with and adopted by masculinity and femininity. This is gender role. Finally, we have a sexual orientation, which indicates emotional, romantic, or sexual attraction. So, while in other living beings, sexuality is driven by biological, instinctual processes, in the human being, it is composed of biological, psychological, cultural, and drive elements, which condition sexual action, which in turn structures the subject. In this sense, we can say that human sexuality is at the same time biologically given, psychologically elaborated, culturally conditioned, and morally chosen. That's why it's very, very complex. Within this framework, we are going to review three paradigms, that is to say, three ways to approach, to interpret, to understand human sexuality, in order to explore the aforementioned registers and their interactions. First paradigm, biological paradigm. This paradigm is known also as the born this way theory. This paradigm maintains that human sexuality would be determined by biological mechanism of a genetic and/or endocrinological order, which would operate an early cerebral programming on which gender identity and sexual orientation would depend. However, the biologist view lacks scientific evidence, as the genetic, endocrinological, and neuroimaging investigations have not identified characteristic features of the transgender and homosexual population in comparison with the control population, to which these conditions could possibly be traced. Moreover, the biologist paradigm fails to grasp the complexity of the human condition, in which biology is mixed with the psychological, social, and cultural elements. This is what is taught by epigenetics, a branch of biology that investigates the biological mechanism regulating gene expression, which is influenced by signals internal but also external to the organism, and is therefore also connected to cultural stimuli. That is why various neuroscientists, including the authors of the Candle Manual, the title is Principle of Neural Sciences. This is a kind of Bible of the neural science. And the author of the chapter about sexuality concluded that nowadays it's incorrect to say that gender and sexual orientation would depend on biology. This is the quotation. Are gender and sexual orientation biologically determined, or are they social constructions shaped by cultural expectations and personal experiences? We are still far from being able to discern the different contribution of genes and the environment to such complex phenomena. However, the fact that it is well known that genes and experiences interact in shaping neural circuits gives us a more realistic frame of reference with which to answer this question. Unlike our predecessors, who were bound by the simplistic idea that the genes and experiences act in a mutually exclusive manner. Let's move to the next slide to describe the second paradigm, that is to say, the cultural paradigm. This paradigm is known also as gender theory. If the first paradigm we saw connect human sexuality just to biology, the second one, we are going to see it, connect human sexuality just to the cultural speech. So is the other side. So this paradigm promotes the naturalization of human sexuality in favor of a cultural understanding of it. Indeed, it does not merely record male and female in order to overcome archaic patterns. This is absolutely shareable, but argues that the subject could experience sexuality independently of being male and female. Put differently, gender theory does not only position itself at the level of gender role, promoting a more appropriate remodulation of male and female than in the past, but it also positions itself at the level of gender identity and sexual orientation, totally abstracting them from the bodily datum, that is to say, from the first level of human sexuality, what we called before sex. To grasp the core of gender identity, I usually quote Gail Rubin, who is an important thinker, who said, "The dream I find most stimulating is that of an androgynous and genderless, but not sexless society, in which individual anatomy is irrelevant. This is the point. Human anatomy, that is to say, to be male or female, would be irrelevant to who one is, what one does, and with whom one makes love. That is to say, to be male or female would be insignificant. In conclusion, gender theory captures the complexity of human sexuality, noting that not everything is biologically determined, contrary to what the biologist paradigm claims. So this is a good side of gender theory. And not only because gender rules are culturally connoted, but also because gender identity and sexual orientation are not inevitable extensions of biological sex, as the transgender and homosexual condition exemplify. On the other hand, this is the critical point, the problematic point. On the other hand, the biological datum, that is to say, sex, being male or female, is not even superfluous, as gender identity actually professes. In this sense, I'm going to quote Geneviève Morel. She's a French psychoanalyst. She wrote, "If gender theory contains a kernel of truth, namely that not everything in sexuality is anatomy, it restores the old idea of a duality between body and mind." Thank you. Next slide. Now, let's move to consider the third paradigm. As you can imagine, this is what I propose to you because it put together body, underlined by the first paradigm, and culture, underlined by the second paradigm. So the personalist paradigm conceives the person in her corporal and spiritual unity, corpore et anima unus, and understands sexual difference as a constitutive trait of the person, which affects the subjective determination and the way of inhabiting the world, given that this is Carmelo Vigna, an important Italian philosopher. He wrote, the logos means the social speech, so the cultural element. The logos informs the body, informs sexuality, the way in which we conceive human sexuality, masculinity, femininity, and so on. So the logos informs the body, as gender theory says. That's the good side we said before. So the logos informs the body, it's true. However, in another way, it must also be said that the logos is also informed by the body. That's the lack of gender theory, which does not recognize this second part of the sentence that we are going to explain, because we have to understand what does it mean that the body informs the logos. In this sense, the personalist paradigm paves the way to obviate the one-sidedness of the biologist and culturalist paradigm. The subject possesses and at the same time is his body. We have, but we also are our body, through which we open ourselves to the world and the world opens itself to us. However, the body gives itself and lives in difference, which is why males and females are characterized by specific postures, attitudes. The male external body and the female internal body ensure that the two sexes arrange themselves in the world according to the corresponding inclinations and symbolic declinations of penetrating and welcoming. This is what the event of generation certifies. The generative event unfolds in male penetration and female reception, which symbolically express the active and receptive trait of love and lead the men and women to experience their bodies under the sign of power and acceptance. This is to be understood not only in physical terms, but also in transcendental terms, as each man and woman experiences the capacity of his or her body to inhabit men, others, and to be inhabited by others, women. So, in conclusion, about this paradigm, in conclusion, the personalist paradigm reveals two specific ways of being and existing, masculine and feminine, which should not be understood from an essentialist point of view, aimed at a priori defining woman and man and their respective roles within the relationship and in the different registers of life. Before we said that it's important to overcome archaic stereotypes. Rather, it's possible to grasp by approximation the lines and directions of a path that each person is called upon to tread in his or her irreducible singularity and to live in relation to a different other. So let's give some final considerations about the first question. So to sum up about the three paradigms that I illustrated. So we can say, first of all, that in men means in human being, everything biological also has a symbolic value, which is why being gendered as male, female, does not predetermine and yet orients the subject's way of being and existing. Because of its symbolic value, male-female sexual nature does not pre-decide and yet directs the identification process and the way of inhabiting the world. It is not a matter of choosing or opposing biological structure and symbolic order, given and interpreted as biologism, first paradigm, and culturalism, second paradigm, do. It is a matter of composing nature and culture, recognizing the primacy of the natural over the cultural, insofar as nature constitutes the furrow in which the subject is called upon to operate the identifying self-interpretation, as personalism, third paradigm, points out. In this sense, the originally male-female qualification to which the biblical male and female he created them gives voice, triggers the task of becoming men, women. Here you can see the last quotation by Frate and Canzi, two Italian psychologists. They invite to consider jointly the plans of sexuality, plans, sex, gender, and sexual orientation, for the symbolic value of corporeity. Let's quote them. We restore to the sexed body its symbolic value. We are conceived as male or female, and we are entrusted with a project to develop, namely that of becoming a man or a woman.
Thank you, Father Alberto. So the second question, in part you have already answered with the personalist paradigm, but I think you will have something more to say, to add, kind of to top it up in a way. So it is, what is the Christian perspective on sexuality, and what view does the Church, and specifically the Catholic Church, have on sexuality?
Thank you for this question. You're right, I partially answered before. Now I'm going to complete the answer to this question. Being gendered as male-female unveils, according to a continuum of biological, psychological, and spiritual order, two ways of being and existing, characterized by specific inflections, attitudes. Masculine and feminine constitute two emerging forms of the whole, two ways of naming the totality. The totality is humanity. Masculine and feminine are two ways to incarnate this totality. There is not a kind of universalian terem. Totality is declined always in dual form. Thus emerges the sense of what we can call ethics of difference. Ethics of difference, intent on breaking out of the narcissistic one-sidedness of one's own imposed inclination as universal, without or against the other, and assuming an attitude of grateful recognition with and for the other. The male-female relationship is historically wounded, and yet it is not. Let's think about Adam and Eve after the original sin. So the male-female relationship is historically wounded, as all relationships. Let's think about Cain and Abel. Think about, okay, we could illustrate it. But focusing our attention on the relationship between male and female, we can say that it is historically wounded, and yet it is not apolitically destined to be configured in the perspective of the extraneousness, if not abuse and rivalry. It is called to assume the conformation of mutual revelation. That's the positive meaning of sexual difference. Conformation of mutual revelation. Human nature never emerges as neutral, but is always characterized in a masculine or feminine sense. Sexed corporeality is not an accidental but essential feature of the subject, which translates common nature into dual terms. The irreducibility of sexual difference says that male and female are not the whole way of being a human being, but are faced with the other way, inaccessible to themselves of being. To conclude, sexual difference speaks of contingency and at the same time transcendence, insofar as it is inscribed in the subject as a limit, circumscribing the subject in one version of the human. But is also a richness, because invite the subject to open itself up to the other version of the human, in order to achieve what he neither is nor can pursue on his own, that is to say, the generative communion. Thus stands out the interweaving of sexual difference, self-giving, and fecundity, which the Italian cardinal Angelo Scola calls nuptial mystery. The nuptial perspective is corroborated by the first chapters of the book of Genesis, which delineate the physiognomy of human love according to three coordinates. Humanity is created in the unity of two different beings. God created men, male and female, he created them. Second coordinate, the two versions of the human are created in view of communion. It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper that is like unto him. Man shall leave his father and his mother, and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. Third, final coordinate, the communion between the two declinations of common human nature allows them to cooperate in the divine creation. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. So, the concatenation of the three constitutive elements of love between man and woman, unity dual, communion and procreation. This concatenation outlined in Genesis makes it possible to assert that this is a Jesuit from the University of Naples who said, a Jesuit, and there is another quotation. By the way, the concatenation of these three elements allows us to assert that the meeting of the couple constitutes the basis of the relationship of kinship and generation, and allows us to recognize the positive polarity of the human sexual relationship, which says both parental union and filial procreation. So we can say that being male or female is not irrelevant, as we heard before. On the contrary, being male or female brings a meaning. The meaning is nuptiality. That is to say, a calling to live a generative communion. Sexual difference is the starting point to open me to the other version of the human being, to bring with him, to live with him, with this other version, a generative communion.
Thank you. And so after you have outlined this view of the Catholic Church on sexuality, we were interested in understanding a bit more what is the pastoral approach of the Church towards people who might struggle to understand their sexual identity, and maybe those even transitioning towards a new gender identity. So if you can kind of outline what's the pastoral approach.
So thank you very much. This question is very delicate. So my answer will be a bit longer. I invite you to be patient. So I titled this answer Pedagogy of Love, inspired by Pope Francis' view to be close to fragility, to fragile people. So the complexity of human sexuality is certified by the fact that it is fallacious to believe that the aforementioned levels of sex, gender, and sexual orientation coincide by internal drive alone, as documented by the occurrence of conflicts and sometimes contradictions. The concordance between male-female sex, man-woman gender identity, and heterosexual orientation is statistically the norm. However, other sexual conditions are found in the population, as it is exemplified by three conditions. First condition, hermaphroditism, in which the subject has gonadal tissue of both sexes. Second condition is transgenderism, in which the subject experiences a gender identity that differs from the one assigned at birth on the basis of the sex. The third condition is homosexuality, in which the subject experiences attraction to persons of the same sex. So, as we can read in the slide, the concatenation of sexual identity, female versus male, therefore gender identity, woman versus man, therefore heterosexual orientation, which until a few decades ago was almost unanimously considered normal and therefore normative, is now cracked in all three of its links. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, speaks of a two-stage birth of sexuality. And Jacques Lacan, another popular, very famous psychoanalyst, French psychoanalyst, speaks of a process of sexualization in reference to the pathway that moves from, we said before, from being male, female, to becoming men, women. You remember the last slide of the first answer. The symbolic value of the body is the starting point of this process. From being male, female to becoming. This is the process. Becoming men, women. This process is influenced by internal and external factors. Developmental history, affective, cognitive, and social capacities, family relationships, peer comparison, cultural models. The complexity of the process is demonstrated by the number of adolescents who nowadays reject the body in its natural features and struggle to accept and develop the generative drive component. According to recent surveys, those who deviate from the male-female sex, man-woman gender identity, heterosexual and heterosexual orientation, concordance, have risen from 2.2 to 5.6% in 2014. These surveys were made in the United States. To 9% in 2022. Which is the reason of this increase? The increase in the number of people who manifest difficulties in the mentalization of the corporal self, that is to say, difficulties in this process, and deviate from heterosexual binarism is, at least to me, ascribable to 5 main reasons that I'm going just to share without explaining them deeply. Firstly, crisis in the family, which undermines the primary mechanism of identification. Secondly, modern views of freedom as something absolute, which could dispose of everything, including corporeality, without any kind of limit. Thirdly, fluid models of sexuality, which have a disorienting effect, especially on young age groups, due to the fact that the subject owes a debt to practical experience through which he comes to consciousness. Fourth, the spread of the capitalistic mentality, which understands the subject as flexible and fungible, reducing it to a commodity, part of the global market. Let's think about the surrogacy maternity, JPR. The womb of the woman is a part of the market, and the baby as well. Fifth, disembodiment correlated with the advent of the infosphere, which fluidifies identity understandings. These are, for me, the main reasons of this increase of in the number of people who manifest some difficulties in developing their sexuality. So the increasing number of individuals who experience difficulty in sexuation is a cause for concern, as it threatens mental health, as it is evidenced by literature data, according to which those who deviate from heterosexual binarism have a higher rate of mental ill health, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, attempted suicide. So for the so-called social stress model, mental health difficulties would be attributable to purely cultural reason, that is to say, stigma and discrimination. I don't want to deny that it is possible to have this kind of discrimination, but I want to point out something else. That is to say that the persistence of negative mental health outcomes in contexts that are culturally inclined to demands for sexual liberation invites us to explore other more deep-rooted factors that contribute to this stress. Here I reported a quite long quotation that we can share. Just as it is a disservice to non-heterosexual subpopulations to ignore or downplay the statistically higher risk of negative mental health outcomes they face, so it does them a disservice to misattribute the causes of this elevated risk or to ignore other potential factors that may be at work. The social stress model deserves further research, but should not be assumed to offer a complete explanation of the causes of mental health disparities if clinicians and policymakers want to adequately address the mental health challenges faced by the LGBT community. This is a very important report that if you want, later on I can give you the literature data. So, according to the psychological investigation inherent to psychoaffective maturation, I'm going to quote another Italian thinker, development normally follows a preferential line, passing through inescapable stages during childhood. It finally arrives at the heterosexual genital relationship as the optimal apex of psychosexual development. End of quotation. So this quotation, the context of this quotation is confirmed by, first of all, the vast prevalence of the heterosexual variant in the population, which constitutes a signal or at any rate an index of the preferred evolutionary orientation, and is confirmed also by the lesser realizable possibilities of sexual conditions other than heterosexual. That is what I would like to document. So, with regard to, let's consider, first of all, transgenderism and secondly, homosexuality. With regard to transgenderism, not recognizing oneself in the body means to reject a constitutive elements of oneself. As we said before, illustrating personalistic paradigm. And it is evidenced by the fact that any attempt to reconcile body and psyche by means of hormone surgery is highly costly on a physical, psychic level. As for the puberty blockade, there is a lack of scientific evidence of improvement in mental health, body image, and psychosocial functioning. You know that better than me because of the CAS report, so I think that it's not necessary to explain this because you live in the country where this scientific evidence where okay, so CAS report is CAS is a pediatric who studied scientific data available in literature, and he gives the results to the NHS, and the NHS realized that this kind of the puberty blockade, lacks of evidence in order to the improvement of mental health subject. That's why they decided to close a lot of hospitals and to put single cases just in, how can I say, in a specific and I cannot remember the English word. In specific pathways, yeah, yes. If I remember the word, I will tell you, but I think that it's clear. Generally speaking, it's clear what I said. It's clear what I said. So the point is that before in England, people with gender dysphoria used to go through this and undergo this puberty blockade, okay, to stop the development of puberty. To say, so you can decide whether to be man or female. Now let's put in standby. But there are a lot of problematic things. But basically, the point is that scientific studies certified that this is not going to improve the mental health of these guys, these people. So they said, let's change this practice, medical practice, and let's say that we have to consider single cases and to put them in specific pathways of care. Okay? It's better now? Is it better? Okay. So let's consider now the hormonal surgical transition. The hormonal surgical transition, it has a dubious efficacy on psychophysical well-being. Physical discomfort, of which there is some reduction, persists even after treatment, reporting a 12.12 times higher risk of attempted suicide than individuals who did not undergo it. So from this standpoint, the treatment seems unsuitable for resolving the malaise. So this is about the medical treatment for people who suffer of gender dysphoria, transgenderism, and so on. Okay, the word is experimental protocol, okay? Before everyone could say, I wanted to undergo a puberty blockade. Now it's not possible. Now they say, we have to be patient and at least to put you in this kind of protocol, okay? Now let's consider the homosexual condition. With regard to homosexuality, it allows less realizing capacity than heterosexuality, since, I'm going to quote an Italian thinker, in the homo, the couple lacks, in addition to the biological fecundity of the couple, the radical openness, which is that to the hetero. End of quotation. The homoerotic duo, the homoerotic couple, is lacking on both axes of human sexuality. Before, also with Genesis, we say that sexual difference is the starting point for living communion generative. So these are the two axes. Communion, sponsality, the first axis, generativity, second axis. So, homoerotic couple lacks on both axes. The first one of sponsality, insofar as the other is not the different, hetero. Hetero means different. But the similar, homo. Homo means similar. On the second axis of generativity, due to the structural sterility of the couple. Now let's consider both of these axes. On the first axis, the unitive level, the heterosexual couple is based on reciprocity, while the homosexual is based on sameness.
this implies a lack of differentiation and put at risk interpersonal communion, implies a deficiency of communion, because communion is possible in and for the difference. There is a reciprocity that is lacking. This is what the lack of complementary attests to at the somatophysic level, which makes sexual intimacy and the integration of different gender traits deficient. The heterosexual union benefits from radical differences, which in the homoerotic couple are only partially compensated for when sensitivities typical of the opposite sex arise in the partners. So now I'm going to quote a French thinker, Xavier Lacroix. He wrote, "Between a man and a woman can pass, something that will never take place between two men or between two women. A form of mutual inhabitation, a way without equivalent of embodying the you in me and me in you. That is the essence of love." End of quotation. Let's now consider the second level, the generation. On the procreative level, the sterility of the homoerotic couple cannot be overcome by recourse to medically assisted procreation or adoption. Because of the critical, when I say cannot, I'm not speaking from a legal point of view, but from an anthropological point of view. Why? Because of the critical issue involved in these practices. Medically assisted procreation, which in the homoerotic couple is necessarily heterologous. Heterologous means that at least one of the gametes, sperm and egg cells, does not belong to the couple, but someone else outside the couple. So, and this practice causes in the offspring a lack of meaning about the origin, which put at risk the identity process. Because to say who I am, this is the identity question, who I am. To answer to this question, I have to know to whom I belong, from where I come, which is my origin. So there is a problem, the identity process is put at risk for the offspring. And considering the couple, just one partner transmits the genetic heritage and is the natural parent, while the other assumes the role of social parent, with feelings of inferiority and the threatening ghost of the donor, of the giver of the gamete. Adoption, let's consider adoption. Adoption is not without its criticalities either, since a good family is such if you have good parents who love you, for sure. But a good family is such even, needs even a good structure. So good family is such if you have good parents, but also a good structure, which is based on the male-female dialectic because of its symbolic affective value. The sexual difference embodied and made known by the proximity to the male paternal figure and the female maternal figure, known by the proximity to the male paternal figure and female paternal figure, triggers in the offsprings the mental perception of the impossibility of self-sufficiency, of the distinction between generations, and of filiation and parenthood. Now, all these considerations as Carlo at the beginning of the meeting clarified rightly, we are offering not a consideration of single people, but a cultural consideration, because every case has to be approached with prudence and with discretion. So now let's see how can we realize this approach. All these considerations raise the question regarding the type of pastoral guidelines suitable for non-heterosexual people. It is my intention to indicate 4 elements. First, caution is required of those who manifest difficulties in the sexual sphere, particularly during puberty, when the subject is invaded by sexuality. The body completely changes, and this inevitably raises identity and relational questions. In the transit from childhood to adolescence, there is a certain physiological, normal, I can say, fluidity in gender identity and sexual orientation. So it is improper to qualify ipso facto, automatically, as a transgender person, those who feel unaffective and/or cognitive discomfort with sex, and homosexual, those who feel a confusion in sexual orientation. With regard to gender identity, it fluctuates greatly in individuals with gender dysphoria, especially in childhood and adolescence. With regard to sexual orientation, homosexuality does not present itself as a unitary fact, but as a set of distinct realities, among which there are 3 main groups: accidental or circumstantial homosexual inclination, which is due to a misinterpretation of sexual experience. That is to say, there is a relational confusion which does not imply an enduring homoerotic desire. Reactionary or symptomatic homosexuality, which develops in reaction to a need for recognition. This form has a psychological origin, which may fixate on or open up to heterosexuality, such that a homosexual experience is not enough to define a person as such. Finally, structural homosexuality, which is rooted in the type of integration of sexual rules in childhood. In this case, the personality tends to assume narcissistic traits and struggles to venture towards the other sex. So this was the first indication, caution. Second indication, the Church calls for the dignity of every person to be protected. Because before being homosexual, heterosexual, transgender, we are human beings. And in Christian view, this is to say that we are image of God. So we have a dignity that never, never, never can remove. So the Church calls for the dignity of every person to be protected. This is what is expressed by the biblical notion of Imago Dei, according to which the human being arises through direct intervention by God and through communion with God. We are called to life in order to enter in communion with God and with brothers and sisters. We are son and daughter of God, that is to say, brothers and sisters among each other. Exactly like Trinity, the Father is for the Son is by the Father, the Spirit with the Son, with the Son. We are Imago Dei, that's why we realize ourselves in the mutual donation, in the mutual gift, being for, by, and with each other. Thirdly, third indication, third pastoral guideline, personal choices promote or harm the imago of the Creator, which is why it is incumbent to discern life conduct oriented to the good in each field of existence, not just in the field of sexuality. But now we are focusing our attention on this topic. So This does not preclude, with regard to the topic at hand, it has to be noted that sexual relationships that deviate from heterosexual binarism contravene the nuptial ordo of love imprinted in and expressed by the body. That's what we said before in the last part of the first answer and in the second answer. This does not preclude the possibility of finding in non-heterosexual couples positive elements, such as affection, support, solidarity. These elements derive, however, from the fact that the union is also a friendship, which entails positive values, which in themselves have nothing to do with being sexual partners and indeed are put at risk by sexual practice, insofar as it is incapable of signifying the nuptial dynamic in the flesh. For this reason, it is appropriate to exhort people to live out sexual relationship that deviate from heterosexual binarism in chastity. That is not limited to continence. It is also configured as a virtue that integrates the person and guarantees the integral gift of self. So to live this kind of relationship in the form of philia, not to disqualify, but to invite them to live in the form of philia. Fourth indication, last guideline. The Church's preeminent task, I said something before, is to propitiate the encounter with God, Trinitarian God, being for, by, with. In the communion of life of the Church, those who depart from heterosexual binarism can verify the possibility of assuming a certain form of life, living the condition of celibacy as a vocation. I'm going to quote one of my teachers in Rome. He wrote, "A deep experience of communion is necessary in order to discover a certain fullness of life. This communal experience is especially important for the development of virtue. And in the case of emotional support, it is even more important. Only with a personal follow-up, with specialized counseling, can one help to discern any possibility of a choice of state in a person who has felt homosexual tendency or has even practiced homosexuality."
So now we can open to some questions. I can start one myself. That is in the, yeah, maybe we can do one at a time. Okay, maybe 2 or 3. So my question is, when you said that well, you are born a male and female, but you are also called to become a male or a female, so a man and a woman. And my question is, how can parents, grandparents, educators, as a community help our children, teenagers, and each one of us in this process in which you not only are born male or female, but you become a man and a woman. And this is, I think, so the question of education. Yeah. Another question?
Thank you for the academic overview. I hope you won't be asking questions of us later. Do I understand from your last chapter of your talk that when at the start of Mass we sing all are welcome in this place, the church means it and God loves everybody equally. Yes? Thank you.
Another one? Another question?
There is a lot of talk nowadays about transgender people. Oh, George. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about transgender people, but surely there is no such thing as transgender. Yeah. Yes.
I hope my English is going to support me now. So let's start from Tom's question. For sure, it was my intention to point out, to highlight, it was my intention to highlight that God loves us equally. The second point is that properly for this reason, he wants that we assume good conduct of life in all our activities, not just about sexuality. So that's why we as Christian community, we are called to discern, to understand which conduct of life are good for people or not. But the starting point is what you said. That's properly for this reason that we are interested in grasping the meaning of human sexuality in order to help each other to educate to this meaning. So now that's why I'm moving to the question posed by Father Raffaele. This is a central question. Before I said that we develop our identity in a certain social context. That's why social models are going to affect this development. So we are sons of our time. There is a beautiful quotation by Thomas Mann in The Magic Mountain, where he said that each one of us lives double life, personal and social. So if this is true, we are called to offer each other, especially to the young people, a place, an ambiente, an environment, human environment, where to see, where to touch, where to hear a certain way of life. Let's think to the first chapter of the first letter of St. John. What we heard, what we touched, and so on, we tell you in order to allow you to be in communion with us and through us to be in communion with God. So we need to build a social environment. Social environment means that what in Italian we call corpo intermedio, can I say? By the way, social place, schools, and so on. And for Christians, this environment is the Christian community. Tomorrow, they told me, the priest of St. Charles Borromeo parishes told me that they are going with 20 more or less guys to have a day together. That's the point, to share time. Because, again, we need to see. This is what an important, a lot of important philosophers, communitarianism philosophy, for instance, Charles Taylor, Alasdair MacIntyre, said that we learn living by practicing through practices of good life. So what I would say is that, is that clear enough? Last point about what Tom asked. No, sorry, George. Sorry, George asked, is that as I tried to explain at the beginning, it's not correct. It's incorrect to say that we would born homosexual, heterosexual, transgender because of the lack of evidence, because we are biology and culture as intertwined. As do you remember the quotation by the Manuel Candle, the Candle book, I called the Bible of Neurosciences. He said it's not possible today to say that gender identity, in this case, transgender identity, would depend just only by biological elements, because we are more complex. And that's what I tried to explain, showing the mix of nature and culture that, at least to me, has to be interpreted recognizing the primacy of nature in order to deal with this task of becoming man and woman from the starting point of being a male or female.
Other question? I have a lot.
No, I just had a question to say that these four pastoral attentions for non-heterosexual people, I found very nice, and maybe if you can say a few things about it, the fact that I think they also have a big link with heterosexual people as well, because I'm thinking about myself being heterosexually married, and I'm thinking, you know, there is a lot of marriage which is about, you know, learning how to become better friends with one another, so that chastity, or learning our place in the world together, the vocation, or learning always how we can defend our dignity. So I found fascinating the fact that as pastoral attentions for non-heterosexual people, they can also be kind of addressed to heterosexual people in a way.
Just to say that, given that there are a lot of hands, I'm not going to answer. I just say that I share this point of view, and we have to recognize that it's necessary to purify our relationship between men and women, between friends, and so on. So I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you. We could say in how to do it. The way is what we said before, to participate to a Christian community. And we could say something more about relationship and marriage, but prefer to.
Hello, my name's Gabrielle. I just wanted to say first, thank you so much for the talk, very comprehensive, and I also thought very respectful and lovingly done. I guess my question is a bit more for practical application as a healthcare worker, as a mother of small children, what advice you would give on how we go through in a Christian-like manner with family members or friends that identify as homosexual or transgender. What is kind of, I guess, our obligation? How do we engage in those kind of conversations with them? Any practical advice on that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your talk. I have to admit, a lot of it was above my head. So, I'm Kevin, yeah. Quite a lot of the talk was above my head. I'm still trying to get my head around it. You know, I do look at things from quite a lower level. I don't have your level of education, but I know homosexual couples, and they're happy homosexual couples in loving relationships. And I see them rejected by our church. They come to Mass, or they want to go to Mass on Sunday, and at the Eucharistic service, they are refused. And that pains me when we say, as somebody said here, all are welcome. That's not what I see. And this seems to be that, and I just cannot understand that. So I'm hearing this, but I have something inside me that's not in agreement with this. And where do I go with that? And I also have Pope Francis, who am I to judge? But when I see this couple, this loving homosexual couple, being judged by the church, and I find that painful.
Maybe we can answer that bit. Start answering.
So thank you very much for your questions. About Gabriel's question, I would say that practical application, I would say that let's give an example. Word 3 times happened that a couple, parents, told me about the homosexuality of their child, and they asked me what would be opportune to say to their child. The first point that they always suggest, is to say to this child that they love him or her, because he or she is a person, because the perspective of faith, because he or she is a guy, and because he or she is image of God. So the very, very first point is to say, I love you. The second point is that properly because I love you, I desire with you to discern which ways of life can help you to realize your person. Properly for that. And at that point, now I'm going to say something more about Kevin's question, but for now, let's assume what I said before, that the homosexual condition is lacking on both of the sexual dimension of human sexuality, both of the dimension of human sexuality, generative and also on the level of sponsality. So I would help positively to recognize the meaning of the beauty of sexual difference. To recognize, remember when the apostles asked Jesus about men and women, Matthew chapter 19. And Jesus said in the principle, and he refers to the first chapter of Genesis, because the first chapter of Genesis does not adopt a scientific, not even an historical approach. They don't want to say what happened or how the creation happened. They want to say with a wisdom approach what belongs to the human experience from the very beginning. It's a might in the noble sense of this word. So Jesus refers to this chapter for this reason. And he speaks of principle, in the principle. John Paul II, in his catechesis on the human love, used to say that this expression in the principle is not just chronological, is ontological and axiological. That is to say that over there in these chapters, we can recognize, we can grasp, we can individuate the meaning of human sexuality. And the meaning of human sexuality is what I said before for Genesis: sexual difference, communion, generation. So there is a structural lack in the homosexual couple. So practical application, first of all, to say, I love you. Secondly, to say, look, if he or she is young, before I spoke of caution, don't be in a hurry saying, I'm this and this. No. A lot of questions are normal at your age. So let's live together in a good community where to help to develop our life and to understand who we are. And in this path, day by day also, especially when he or she grows up, try to understand the meaning of human sexuality, and as I said before, to live relationship in the form of philia, friendship. So now I'm going to, I try to say something about Kevin's question. Again, I recognize that in some couple, as I said before, there can be a lot of positive elements. But if it's right what I said before, these elements are related to the fact that this relationship is always, in a certain way, a kind of friendship. It's not related to the fact that they live the relationship in the way that conflicts is not respectful of this meaning of human sexuality. That's why the point is to help these people, at least to me, to live their relation in the form of friendship. And I want to say also that for sure we have mature. We have to mature like church in order to be attentive, be careful with everyone, also with someone who has an homoerotic attraction. When you rightly remembered Pope Francis' expression, who am I to judge? It's important that, for me to recall it, to understand this point, because church never, in any case, is allowed to judge the person. Never. Church is allowed to judge the act. That's the point. The Council of Trento says that I'm not allowed to say whether or not I'm in the state of grace. Just God can read my conscience. In any case, the priest in the confessional room cannot say you are in state of grace or not. The priest can say, look, if you did these things with will and reason, this is a sin. So we are not allowed to judge person. We are called to judge the acts and to say whether or not a certain lifestyle is according to the gospel or not. I think that this distinction is very important, because again, I'm not allowed to judge the person, but not eventually, I'm called to judge the lifestyle in order to discern whether or not it is according to the gospel.
Thank you. Let's go to this side. There are some questions here as well. Yeah.
Father, I'm Christine. I have a complicated. My name's Christine, and I have a complicated situation in as much that my grandson is in the process of transgendering. He's with a long-term girlfriend. They are now expecting a baby. Now, what would happen if they wanted to eventually get married? I'm trying obviously not to judge or make any, but it's a situation I'm finding it very hard to understand fully.
There is someone who put a question in the chat of the Zoom connection. So I go.
So the question is, it seems the question is, it seems to me that there has been a partial stepping back from the most extreme ideas on gender in the common culture in the last year. Are you seeing this trend as well? And what do you think is causing it?
So about Christine, the answer is that if they asked to get married before the transition, theoretically it would be possible, but the point is, as always, that the priest is going to verify which is the perspective. So if someone comes to me as priest and they said, look, we would like to get married, but in 6 months I will do this transition, the question is very complicated, because you are going to say yes, knowing that the future situation will be absolutely complex for them and for children. So that's the point. Okay, so that's the point. About the second question, I would say that for sure nowadays, I remember that in 2017, there was a weekly in the Economist. Is a weekly or a monthly? I don't remember. Monthly. In any case, the Economist wrote a paper saying that, an editorial, saying that there was against let me say, synthetically, against the cancel culture, the woke culture. So against, because they say the Economist is a left monthly, but in this case they say, look, a lot of minorities are going to steal freedom, speech freedom, for instance, to other people. Sorry, but I would answer more precisely, not to be because, but my English is that, so. No, because a lot these topics are very complex, so it's important not to be. I wanted to be understood, but in any case, hopefully you are going to understand my point. That until a few years ago, the culture was really in favor of these kind of the East views of sexual liberation. Nowadays, a lot of things are going to change. Let's give an example. The Cass report. We say that scientific evidences are not supporting a certain view of sexuality. This is a scientific evidence. So the social and political community are going to say, look, maybe we have to be prudent. We have to wait. We have for this reason and other reasons as well. I think that the answer is that nowadays there is a kind of balance and in order to deal with this topic.
Anyone else? There is still one.
Thank you very much. My name is Yvette. Yvette. I was just going back to some of the responses and looking at your statistics. It's increasing. Homosexuality, transgender, it's going up. And they ask the question, when they come to church, especially the young ones, they want to feel loved. They want to feel they're coming to church to feel loved, wherever they are. And I would like to take back that when we come to church, we're human beings, first and foremost, like you said. And then when they come and ask whether they're heterosexual, homosexual, whatever they identify with, the humanity of love comes first. And they leave the church feeling loved, not lost.
Anyone else would like to say a question? Just one, yes. Otherwise, Father Alberto is exhausted.
No, just a consideration. Again, I agree with you 100%. I would use this image, this biblical icon. Jesus take us, bring us from wherever we are. Prostitutes, publicans. Let's think to the eighth chapter of John, because it's helpful also to understand the question of judgment. Which is the difference between Jesus and the other people who wants to kill the woman. The judgment of the people is a judgment which is going to disqualify the person. The judgment of Jesus, because Jesus is judging, is saying, go and never do it. So this is a judge. But the judgment of the act is not to disqualify, but to correct. This is, I think, the attitude that we are called to assume to each other. To judge, not to disqualify, but to help each other. And that's why Jesus takes us from wherever we are. Not to leave us there, but to initiate, to initiate, to start a pathway of conversion.
Thank you very much, Father Alberto, for this interesting evening. For taking the time come here and to give his time to explain all these things that if you agree, will be available then in a video, so you can watch the lesson, the talk, and meditate. And for my point of view, just to say thank you for putting all these topics, sexuality, and all you said in a positive context of communion, of giving each one to the other, of generation, and also education, because we are here, I think, as a church, to help each other, to help our children, to help everyone really to become what God wants. Obviously, with a lot of issues, problems, with a lot of difficulties and mistakes because of the original sin, but in the same path all together to help each other to be hopefully more what God wants from us. So thank you very much. And when you leave, if you want to give a donation for the tea and coffee, cheese and wine, there is a basket over there and over there as well. And there is also the contactless machine if you left the cash at home. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Have a good weekend. Thank you, Alberto. Thank you.